Good afternoon to you, Mr. Thomas. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Thomas. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And how are you? I can see brightness in your face. It's all over the screen.
As usual.
As usual. You need to give me
it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure seeing you too, Mr. Thomas.
Indeed, indeed. You need to give me some of that secret, whatever you're doing. I'd like to do some of that too.
When you come to Dominica. Okay.
All right. Well, let me
start by saying good afternoon to all our viewers of our Facebook page. Today is the 4th day of September in the year 2022. Welcome to yet another program, and this program is called the Civic Vibes. I would like to say a very special good afternoon to Mr. Loftus Duran, the host of the program. This afternoon, Mr. Duran is not with us, but wherever he is, I hope that he's listening. And I know we are going to do justice here this afternoon to our topic. I want to say good afternoon to everyone that is on the live with us this Sunday. A blessed Sunday afternoon to you all. I also want to say special good afternoon to all the students that are going back to school tomorrow. I would like to wish every one of them God guidance and protection. And to those who are going to school for the very first time, I wish every one of them great success, God guidance and protection as well. Mr. Thomas, there's a gentleman who celebrated 107-year birthday on the 2nd of September. And this gentleman, we know him, or most persons know him as Mr. Popeye. His name is Mr. Oscar Joseph. That's one, I guess, one of our, is it the longest living centenarian here in Dominica?
I believe he is. I believe he is. I believe he is. But let me also join you, Paula, in saying a pleasant good afternoon to our many persons who are logged in via Facebook, YouTube. I have the distinct honor to sit in as host for my good friend Lofty Durand this afternoon, who is attending to some of the civic responsibilities. So that's the reason he's not here. I hope I'll be able to do justice to the program, because I can't walk in Lofty's shoes. I'm telling you, Paula. I know you can, but I can't walk in your guys' shoes. But certainly it is a pleasure to be here this afternoon. And like you, I would like to join our many fans who are on, as well as our team at Civic Vibes, to wish, yes, Mr. Oscar Philip Joseph, better known as Popeye. Many of us who are old enough know Popeye up in Goodwill area, and as an entrepreneur, as a business person, as a community man, as a philanthropist. And yes, he celebrated 107 on the 2nd of September, having been born in the year of 1915. So to you, Mr. Popeye, hats off, congratulations, sir. Continue doing what you're doing, keep batting. Let me say though, Paula, that I can identify with that kind of years, given the fact that my grandmother, may her soul rest in peace, died at 111. She lived on the island of St. Croix. That was the mother of Ted Daly from DBS Radio. That's his mom, 111. So the knowledge and the wisdom that we acquire from persons of that age is tremendous. And while on that, maybe I should just say though that maybe the time has come for us to really put together some sort of documentary of our centurions on the island. Because if I'm not wrong, I think in terms of the number of centurions we have the largest number per capita. And maybe it's time for us to document those things, do some interviews, find out what they did and how they did it. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, it was what? I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks for the most, we lost Mr. Hesketh Kazimi, another centurion. He was, I think, 102 or 103, if I'm not mistaken. And again, we know of the involvement of Mr. Hesketh Kazimi with the Music Lovers Government Band over 50 years, and his contribution to business as a businessman, owned CDs. So we need to document those things, because as it says, if you do not know your history, you do not know where you're going.
So true.
Yeah.
So true, Mr. Thomas.
And anything else you want to make mention of? Because I have one other mention I just want to make before we get into the heart of the program itself.
Yes, you can go right ahead, Thomas.
Yes,
go right ahead.
As you may have heard, I'm sure we had a sad situation on the 2nd of September as well, on Friday, where you had an accident in the Mon Espanol area, and a husband and wife succumbed. They passed, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Thomas. I think the husband was some 92 or thereabout, and the third person in the vehicle is at the hospital being treated. So again, on behalf of Civic, Team Civic Vibes, we just want to extend our condolences to the family and friends of the deceased, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Thomas, and to wish well to the third person who was on the vehicle who survived and who is being treated at the hospital. And of course, to many other persons who may be on the live with us or listening and are celebrating anniversaries, birthdays, or lost ones, we want to extend our best wishes, of course, and our condolences to them all. So let's dig into it. Let's go, Paula. Let's go. Let's dig into the discussion.
Well, I too want to extend my condolences to the family and friends of the gentleman and his wife, and also wish well to the third person, like you said, who is at the hospital. I know this afternoon we may not be able to do it like Lofty, because Lofty has a degree when he starts off his program. There's a number of persons who are always with us on a Sunday afternoon. They religiously stick by to hear what our topics are like. And this afternoon, to the number of persons who are on the live with us, I want to say, even though Lofty is not there, stick with us. We are expecting to have a very, very wonderful session here this afternoon in the absence of Mr. Durant. We are going to try our best to do it just like him. Should I say you introduce the topic for this afternoon, Mr. Thomas?
Certainly, Paula. Certainly, Paula, it will be my pleasure. Well, you see, that shows you how powerful this guy is. You know, it takes two of us to do one of him. See what I'm talking about? But yes, like you say, we're hoping to have a very interactive and interesting conversation. I refer to it as a conversation because, of course, we normally get all the comments and the feedbacks and the questions on the live through the Facebook page. And we look forward to responding to some of those comments and questions as we go along this afternoon. But what we are here to discuss this afternoon is the whole question of democracy. A lot of us have used it very loosely. Politicians have used it to their own, charade whenever they want to, seek political mileage. A number of us have used it, democracy. And our topic this afternoon, really, we want to just scratch the surface because that's a topic that is going to require more than one program. But we ask your vote, your right. Your vote, your rights over democracy. Does it matter? And what is our role individually or collectively as citizens as it relates to our vote, our rights, and our democracy? Does it really matter? I mean, those of us who are following the news in the United States see the development, what's taking place, and the fact that the current sitting president, Biden, is out there talking about the soul of the country, the soul of America, the fact that the democracy is a challenge, it has risk. The United States, one of the superpowers, a democracy that has been around for over 200 years. And the question remains then, do we as a young nation, a young republic, a young democracy, is there a need for us to be concerned? Is there a need for us to ask questions? And is there a crisis? Is there a challenge to our own democracy as a young nation? What's your thought on that, Paula?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Democracy. Democracy gives persons the right of freedom of speech, freedom to assembly. And what we've seen over a number of years here in Dominica, there's been a very great problem of people assembling. We've seen time and time again that persons are being harassed when they walk in small groups, be it in the city, be it around the communities of Dominica. We've seen police officers out there with guns and barricades and all of this, and are saying to persons that you are not supposed to assemble, you are not supposed to walk, you are not supposed to speak freely. And where democracy is concerned, in a country where it's supposed to be democracy, and we are seeing this type of things, a number of persons have to ask questions. In any democratic country where you see that police officers sometimes tend to even threaten people, persons who gather, this should be of a great concern. And we know that Dominica is supposed to be a democratic country where persons are supposed to speak freely, persons are supposed to assembly, and we are seeing this is like quickly running out here in Dominica. And sometimes for the persons who know better, and they should do better and educate the persons who are a bit ignorant. These are the persons who say they support what the police officers do sometimes. And we are saying this should come to a halt.
Yeah.
Our democratic right in a country, it allows people to vote, where you should go to the polls and cast your ballot freely. But this we will get into shortly. So for now, Mr. Thomas, let me just hand over to you, because I know whenever you speak, a lot of persons, they listen. And this afternoon, some persons maybe say, why have we chosen this particular topic? We have chosen this particular topic because sometime later in the month, we are going to be celebrating World Democracy Day. So let me hand over to you, Mr. Thomas.
All right, thank you, Paula. Thank you, Paula, for your comments. Let me just begin the conversation by referencing a statement from the United Nations. And when the founders of the United Nations drafted the United Nations Charter, they did not mention the word democracy. Back then in 1945, many of the UN member charters did not endorse democracy as a system, and they didn't practice it during that time. Remember, we were in 1945 during communism, Nazi, the world wars and all of that. Yet the opening word of the chapter in the UN chapter is "we the people." And it goes on to say, "we the people" reflects the fundamental principle of democracy, that the will of the people is the source of legitimacy of sovereign states and therefore of the United Nations as a whole. And it goes on further to say the UN does not advocate for any specific model of government, but promotes democratic governance as a set of values and principles that should be followed for greater participation. And that's where our civic responsibility comes in, as a set of values and principles that should be followed for greater participation, equality, security, and human development. Democracy provides an environment that respects human rights. And you've alluded to that in your comments, the fact that people have a right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and even freedom to protest, and which the freely expressed will of the people is exercised. People have a say in the decisions and can hold decision makers to account. And that is something we have seen in the recent past, where decision makers felt they're not answerable to anyone. Women and men have equal rights, and all people are free from discrimination. And that is the UN's view of democracy. Like you just said, 15 years ago in 2007, the General Assembly of the United Nations decided to designate September the 15th as International Day of Democracy. And the reason therein is with a view to raising that awareness of democracy. And these activities, or rather the reasoning for that 15 years ago, followed on the community of democracies in each international conference of what was called the New and Restored Democracies between 1994 and 2006. And they came to the view that the then Secretary General of the UN came to the view and put together what was called an agenda for democratization, in which he noted that democratization is a process which leads to more open, more participatory, and less authoritarian society, unquote. So come September 15th this year, which is a Thursday, as you pointed out, Civic Vibes, in collaboration with other partners in the community, both in Dominica and out of Dominica, will observe International Democracy Day. As the program develops today, and I'm sure our next program next week, we will, and throughout the rest of the days via various social medias and the press, we will indicate on that particular day what sort of activities that we will undertake, as I said, in collaboration with other civic organizations on the island. We think it's important enough for us to be a part of observing and speaking on the whole question of democracy. As part of today's program, we have a special guest, which we need to mention, in the name of Lennon Matthew. Lennon is a Dominican. He resides in Texas, but he's an environmental consultant, political activist, I would add, and a patriot at heart. So he's going to join the conversation later on in the program with us and give his perspective. He's someone who is not afraid to speak on the issues as it confronts our country. And therefore, he will share his own perspective on how he views democracy in our country, Dominica, today. Of course, as I said, I'm sure we'll be getting the various comments and feeds on our Facebook page and the YouTube as we go along. But before I get back to you, Paula, let me just quote a few brief quotations as it relates to the whole question of democracy. And here is how various persons and I would say organizations viewed the question of democracy. United Nations, again quoted, "The role of democracy is successful with the participation and support of international community, governing bodies, civil society, and individuals." So each one of us as citizens of Dominica has a role in ensuring that democracy survives and it provides for us as a people what it was intended for. Howard Zinn, who is an American historian, a playwright, philosopher, and social thinker, and a World War II veteran, says, quote, "Protest beyond the law is not a departure from democracy. It is absolutely essential to it." Yeah, what he says? Protest beyond the law is not a departure from democracy. It is absolutely essential to it. So when you have, for example, this number of citizens who march on a Wednesday, and the sitting administration and headed by the Prime Minister chose to denigrate the workers and refer to them in all sorts of terrible ways, that they should not be doing this and they should be at somewhere else, and all these derogative terms that they refer to. That is against the hallmark of democracy. Abraham Lincoln was quoted as saying, democracy is government of, by, and for the people, unquote. That was Abraham Lincoln many years ago. Alan Moore, an English writer, stated, people shouldn't be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. And of course, there are several more we can quote, I'm sure we can. So Let me just conclude on this segment by saying, it is our responsibility as citizens to vote. But it's also important that we should not go into the voting booth uninformed. So while it's important to vote, we should not go in there uninformed. And that again is a question of democracy. And as you're aware, Paula, we've been talking about electoral reform throughout the last several Sundays. So you need to go there informed. And the only way you can be informed is by participating in the democratic processes. Democracy is a goal, a process that hinges on our involvement. And yes, our involvement and on our rights as citizens. And democracy as it is powerful. It gives voice to our nations, to our citizens, enabling them to make the changes that they see fit in their own lives. I'll pause here for now. I'm sure you may have a comment or two to make, and I'll come back, and then hopefully we can bring on our guests and have a much more engaging conversation on the topic.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Thomas. And I want to remind Dominicans that in every democratic country, there is government and there is opposition. And Dominica is a democratic country. It's supposed to be a democratic country because there is government and opposition. We go through our elections every 5 years, or we are supposed to go through our elections every 5 years. And when we go to the polls, like you have said, Mr. Thomas, that the persons need to be informed. And there is this concept that governments have developed over a number of years, paying people for their votes. People, you should not allow any candidate that is going up for any political party to have to pay you for your votes. Because when this is done, it takes away your rights. It makes you believe like you cannot speak freely, because the things that you would want to say that you see that is wrong, you can no longer freely speak out. It's like you're being puzzled, because it's like you're being paid to go there, most times to vote for someone maybe who you doesn't even want to really vote for. And this, I consider, it's not like being in a democratic country. Because a lot of countries over the world, there are persons who go out there and they fight just because they know going to vote for a government, they consider that great importance that it is. Here in Dominica, many persons say it doesn't really matter. As long as you give me a few $100, this is okay. And we are saying by just doing this, it is taking away democracy from you. You know something that I have been thinking of? The police officers who comes out every Wednesday to put up these barricades and blocking the citizens who are walking peacefully, praying, singing, chanting down about the wrong things that are happening in the country. I'm wondering if these police officers, they have the constitution of the land. And I believe some of these police officers, they should go there and get the constitution of Dominica, read it and see what it says. Because we are supposed to be in a democratic country. So why do you want to keep shutting up people? There are countries where people go and stand outside the parliament building and they protest. And ministers listen to them what they have to say. And it's by doing this, because we vote for a government, and when we have a problem, we're supposed to see these ministers and talk to them and tell them the things that they are doing that is not right. Here it's completely different. Every Wednesday there are barricades blocking up the area to the financial center, to the ministry. And now I see they have extended it, blocking up the streets to protect one man. And I'm saying these police officers are police officers who know better, and they should do better. First, to continue with a democratic country where persons are allowed to speak out freely, we have to say that these things really got to stop. And for the police officers who continue to do this, when you took an oath for country, not to protect one or two individuals. And we are saying sooner or later, if you all continue to do this and continue to protect just a few set of people, your children and grandchildren, they are not going to enjoy the democracy of Dominica, because they will continue to dictate to them that you should do this, you should say this, you should walk here, you should sit there, you should not say this, you should not do this. And persons who just believe that, every Sunday we come out and we speak because they just figure out we want to just speak, we are saying no, we are educating you. And for some persons, when they hear that police officers, are sending threats and saying that, okay, they're going to arrest the persons walking, I'm saying, whenever they comes out and they say that, the numbers should increase. Let me see how many of Dominicans that they can arrest, because we are not doing anything that is wrong.
Yeah.
We know how we should stand. We know how we should walk.
Yeah.
We are not burning down the city. We are not threatening anybody. We are not destroying anything. It's just persons walking.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct, Paula. You're absolutely right. Let me just respond in a manner to some of the comments you've made. We all the time that, the Dominicans have given away their rights, they don't stand up for their rights, and hence the reason why things are where it is today. Let me just say though that the people still have the power. That's not going to go anywhere. For now, for whatever reasons, and there may be several reasons which we can go into here today and continue that conversation, they have not exercised that power, but the power resides in the people. If I may use an analogy like electricity, there is power in the line. No matter what you do, there's electric current going through. Until you touch it, you realize, oh, you're shocked. So there is power in the citizens, in the people. And you're right. What we do every Sunday and any other times is to enable the persons to understand, the citizens, that yes, you have this power as a citizen. You have that God-given right as enshrined in the Constitution to behave and to do the things that you're doing within the framework of our Constitution. And one of the cornerstones of any democratic society is that the citizens have the power to make change when necessary, in principle, if things are not going well. And as citizens, they have the power to maintain the status quo. But if things don't work out well, they also have the power to change what is happening. So that power resides in our citizens. And as to how we use that power based on our rights as citizens is where the conversation has to be ongoing. Around 5 years ago, the former Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, he addressed on September 2017 what was called the Athens Democracy Forum. And here's what he says. Listen to what he said. He was a former General Secretary. Right now, he has what is known as, I think it's a Kofi Annan Foundation, where he promotes and speaks of democracy and elections and all those virtues. We should remember that democracy is always a work in progress. But a system created thousands of years ago continues to inspire Democrats throughout the world today. We must cherish, reform, and defend democracy, or else it may be lost for future generations. As another Democrat, referring to himself, who drew inspiration from ancient Athens, again, where the whole question of democracy and all of that originated from. Another Democrat who drew inspiration from this ancient Athens was Thomas Jefferson, who puts it this way: the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, unquote. So I'm saying this to say, therefore, that this is an ongoing process. This is something that will not end. This is something that has no stop. So for those who feel, well, hey, you guys come every Sunday and keep saying the same thing over and over, no, it is a work in progress. We have to remain vigilant. We have to constantly, as citizens, voice what we see and know is not going right. Let's pause here now, take just a brief break, and we'll introduce our guest, Mr. Lennon Matthew, who I know is standing by. As I said earlier, this gentleman is no stranger to the mic. He is an environmentalist, consultant. He's a political activist, very loud one at that, and a patriot of Dominica. And that draws me to the other question, you know. This whole question of democracy and what is happening back home in Dominica is not excluded only to those of us living in Dominica, within the 289 square miles. Many of us who are outside of Dominica have our hearts, our aspirations, our hope, whatever you might want to call it, of seeing a better Dominica. This is our home. No matter how long we stay, wherever we might be, in London, in Canada, in the United States, in Timbuktu, home is home, Dominica is home. And we all have a vested interest in ensuring that whatever happens home happens in the best interest of all of us Dominicans, no matter where we are. So we'll take a quick, brief break as we introduce.
Before
Yes,
the break, Mr. Thomas, before
Sure.
we introduce Mr. Matthew, let me just say good afternoon to a few persons on the live here.
Certainly.
So Mali Ostri, Omar Monel, Carol Ann Ford, Teresa Susan Roll, Cyrus Raphael, Elsa Luis, Carol Fontaine, Desmond Riviere, Gina Cassell, Mavella Defoe, Mr. John Blanchard, Rosemary Isles. There's a number of persons like Dave.
I see Zed Lloyd. He says results need time, which is so true.
Yeah. Janita Prince, Petra Cabon, and the list go on and on. Dorian Dorival, and Benny Scotty. Yes. Not Nice, whoever Not Nice is. Marlene Shillingford, Kempton Paul, Judith Cochran, Marshall Lawrence, David Joseph, and we'll also, during the course of the program, we will also read out a few of the messages that persons actually sent. Yes, Lucia James, Zed Lloyd, and the list goes on.
Yes,
so,
certainly, Paula. Thanks for that. Thanks for that introduction. So we'll take a quick break as we go back to Master Control briefly, and then we'll come back as we introduce our guest, Mr. Leonard Matthew.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Thomas.
My heart is heavy, my soul not free. I feel this every day. Maybe I'm just guilty. Dominica has become this way, where our people are standing on political mischief and division. And politicians control citizens' hearts and soul before God, before land, before church, before family and country. Here, Dominica, my true confession is what I didn't do.
as you heard it there from the King Dies, the guy who puts those words and lyrics together. Speaking of country, it begins with each of us. You heard the lyrics in his song. We have to put ourselves second and put country first. And earlier, I alluded to what's going on now in the political arena in the US. And the same is being said, you know, on both sides, on the Republican and Democrat. I mean, some of the things you're hearing, and they're saying, well, hey, put Democratic Party aside, forget Republican Party. Think of the United States of America, where we want it as a country. And I think we can say the same for Dominica. Forget Labour Party, UWP Party, Freedom Party, all other parties, and think of Dominica, where we want to see Dominica going. So with that being said, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our guest, Mr. Lennon Matthew. Mr. Matthew, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to your listeners in Dominica and abroad, and the ones on Facebook Live and here today. Good afternoon to you, and thanks for having me to join the conversation and the discussion this afternoon. I appreciate it, and hopefully I can be of some use to you guys.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
Well, good afternoon to Mr. Matthew as well, to Mr. Thomas. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Matthew. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Paula Celestine. I think we have been in a few circles together, but it's the first time I'm actually making a connection with the name and the face. And good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you. I learned this afternoon that you're one of my family members from Benz. Am I right?
Don't go there, Paula.
You know what? I saw the last name Celestine, and I was thinking that to myself. I wasn't going to say it, but you mentioned it. Yes, I am from Benz, and the Celestine and Benz are related to me. That's my great-grandmother on my dad's side. So I guess we come from the same lineage.
Okay, but I think it's by the marking side.
Yes, exactly.
Didi and others. So let me not expose. Okay? Didi and Jen and all of them.
Yes.
Let me not say anything. I don't want Mr. Thomas to get jealous, okay?
It's a small world. Oh God, I guess I'll be talking to you after this event then.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you see,
after you give a call.
Yeah.
All the more reason that we have to think of Dominica first as against, because it's such a small community. I mean, look, the connection there is. And we build all that animosity. I mean, I know our guest here, Lennon, will have a lot to say, but it pains me, for example, when I heard a couple, I think it might have been a year ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, but when you have a senior minister of government goes publicly on radio and makes the comment that we should get rid or take away the leader of the opposition. Because when he says in his comment, oh, we should just get rid of Mr. T. Pour me say, Alepi, no lasepi. Leonard Clinton. He's referring to the leader of the opposition, which within the Constitution is a constitutional position. So you are saying, as a senior minister, that we should get rid of the leader of the opposition. In what democracy you have a senior minister, a member of parliament, advocating to get rid of a constitutional position, individual, the leader of the opposition? Clearly, we are at a crisis, guys. And don't let me not even go into the question of the Salisbury people on the eve of an election, tear gas on them. And I mean, there are several other areas. But I'm going to hand over now to our good friend, Lennon. And let me begin, Lennon, by putting the question to you, which I'm sure you received from Team Civic Vibes. Your vote, your rights, or democracy, does it matter? Or should we just say, well, you know, it is what it is, let's just go. Where do you see that as an individual and collectively we as a people? What do you think of this whole thing of democracy in Dominica?
My vote, my rights, yes, it is important. And when I first got invited to speak on this conversation, one of the first things I always ask is, why are we talking about democracy? Why is it so important? We hear in democracy here, democracy there. And it's a constant conversation. We've been hearing it for quite some time that Dominica is in the democratic society. And, Mr. Thomas, in several conversations, I have said to you, I think sometimes we have to go back to the basics to understand why some things are important. And it's not until that scientists were able to decode the human genome that they had a greater appreciation of understanding for the various diseases and symptoms and ailments we have, and better be able to treat them. And that is because you go back to the basics, the root foundation. Where did it start? Why is it important? I also ask myself, why aren't we talking about other systems of government, like monarchies, like autocracies, like dictatorships, like authoritarianism? Why are these not part of our conversation when there are other systems of government? And I think in the conversation, what we have lost is the basics, the simple foundation of why we are talking about democracy. And when I look at it, it says it's a system of government by the whole population of all the eligible members of state, typically through elected representation. And as you rightly indicated earlier, that democracy came from Athens around 505 to 507 before Christ. And during that time, there were systems of government that existed in places like China and some of these ancient societies. But what I found interestingly, there were listed 7 principles of democracy, 7 principles. And too often in the conversation, when we talk about democracy, we always mention freedom of speech and free and fair elections. And it would be a mistake of us to just fiddle down democracy to just these 2 items. And the first, and I think the most critical principle of democracy is the participation of citizens. As I said earlier, the democracy is a system of government by the whole population, which means that the society is supposed to encourage the input of every legible individuals, unless you are made ineligible by crimes or some adverse action to the society which you live in. What does that mean, citizen participation? It means that every single person within that jurisdiction, within that government structure, has a right and the freedom to express themselves and to be part of the political process. When you look at the DNA of democracy and the DNA of a society, I put it simply as this: a group of us, we get together and everybody has a gift and a talent and a personality. And if you put 10 people, different people in a room and ask them to come up with a solution for something, or to share food, or to share resources, there's going to be chaos, because some people may want more, some people may want less. And as a result, you have to have a structure or a set of rules in place to decide how are we going to share those resources. And the systems we use to do that is called a governance structure. And that's why I mentioned there are monarchies, there are autocracies, there are dictatorships, there are authoritarians. And then there is democracy. Now, in the old days, you would have the monarchs, where the kings and queens who thought that their authority was divine, and they decided how resources were shared. They decided who lived and died. They decided who got what, who got knighted, and who moved up in life. And as a result, there are a mass of people who were disenfranchised and were made to be subjects. In autocracies, you have individuals who in their own mind think that all decision comes from them, and it's a way of getting the society and the system to move. But what that does, it takes away the second principle of a democracy, which it says equality. And you mentioned the US, and it says in the US Constitution that all men are equal under the law. That means whether you're Black, whether you're white, doesn't matter what family you come from, your rights and your responsibility, you are as a human being, is as equal as anyone that lives within that jurisdiction or in the world, as a matter of fact. So therefore, John Brown from Lapland and Joe Blow from Vickers and Thomas from Point Michel are equal in the eyes of the Creator and everybody under that sun. As a result, in that society and that community, we have decided to live under the laws and the Constitution. we should all have the equal ability to speak, the equal ability to move, the equal ability to share our talents, the equal ability to share our gifts, and the equal ability to share our resources for the development of that community. That's the basics of our government structure of democracy. The next principle of democracy they had was political tolerance. And as you guys have mentioned, we can see what have been happening in Dominica over a period of time, that people who are exercising their right to walk and show disdain for what is happening in our political system are being threatened by law enforcement, threatened with arrest. So you can see the deterioration of political tolerance in Dominica. Another principle of democracy is accountability. Just look at what has been happening in Dominica and tell me if there has been accountability. We've seen citizens being killed in police station extrajudicially. We've seen rumors of people who are in position under the Constitution have taken an oath to serve the country in the ministries, the various ministries, as the permanent secretaries, the finance people, individuals, the accounting generals, all these people who make up a society for the overall oversight of the resources of the state. We see, them turning a blind eyes to the ills of what is happening. Where is the accountability? The next principle we have is transparency. Because if I have a shop and I put somebody in charge of that shop, they can't spend my money as they will. I have to see what they're using it for, what are they doing with it. If there is some spending that has to go on, they have to tell me, hey, this is what we're doing. And everybody who owns a vested interest in that institution or in that business needs to know what is happening. Then one of the principles of democracy is regular, free, and fair elections. And I think we've stressed on that a whole lot, because on my observation, I think our society has become so passive in their own interest, in their own responsibility for democracy, that we have tried to define a democracy as having only regular, free, and fair election. But no, it as Thomas rightly said, it's an evolution. It's a work in progress, but it also involves the citizen participation outside of the cycle of elections. And although regular, free, and fair election is one of the principles of democracy, certainly it's not the most important, because the most important is the participation of its citizens to make sure and ensure that things go right and things go according to the Constitution and according to the rules and agreement that we decide to live in that society. The next one is economic freedom. As I said earlier, the reason why we're having this discussion, because we are in a society that chooses to have a democratic system of government. How do we share the resources? How do we share the responsibility of that society? And economic freedom also comes with something called power, because if you are economically free, you are independent. Let's think of where we came from as Black people in Dominica. Our forefathers were brought across through the transatlantic slave trade. We were taken from our homes in Africa and brought to the Caribbean to work as slaves on plantation to build wealth for Europeans, to build wealth for the white folks who came there and manipulated the people in Africa. What did they do? They used the Black people to plant cane and plant sugar. It was all for economic purposes. And as a result, today we are still seeing the effects of slavery. So one of the most important things of democracy is the ability for independent economic growth, to be able to produce, to be able to use your mind, your heart, your skills, your talent to help in the production in your society. And in certain societies like the autocracies where talents and gifts and skills are stifled, you can see the result of the societies. Look at Chinese development over thousands of years. It's a society that was so divided and unstable because of the constant infighting and the system of government. They basically stifled talent, and to develop they had to go to all lengths to steal technology from other countries to get to the point where they are. So what it tells you is that if you're in a society where people are not free to express themselves, people are not free to contribute their talents because it's decided by an individual or a certain group of people, then the society is at a disadvantage. The next one and I think is also very critical, is control of the abuse of power. Let's make no bones about it. Each and every one of us have the ability to abuse power if given the opportunity to. Each and every one of us have moral guidance and compass which we live by. And even myself, if I am in a position, the temptation to take advantage of that position is strong. And I think we'd be making a mistake to think that this is a Labour Party issue and our Freedom Party. I think we're talking to Dominicans and the people who make up the part of democracy, the people who are involved in that society. We have to have checks and balance. There has to be separation of powers, because if we don't, there are individuals once put in that position with every good intention. There is always that weakness as human beings that we have to abuse our power. And as a result, we have to self-check. And I use that analogy a lot of times. Any engineer who builds a machine or an equipment or a vehicle, and knows that if that vehicle runs, it's going to be getting hot, and does not put systems in place to find out that when it is overheating, then you have control mechanisms in place, is a failure. It's going to overheat, it's going to destroy. The society and life is no different. If we have a system of government where we're supposed to move forward, and we do not put checks and balances on men, all of us included, then we're going to eventually have problems. And I think these 7 fundamental principles of democracy is really, really important in this conversation. Again, I ask, why are we having this conversation? We could be a monarch, but we're not. We could be an autocracy, we are not. There could be a dictatorship, we are not. Although we have, there is evidence that we are already in a democracy. We are already moving to an authoritarianism. But here lies the problem. If the people or the citizens do not understand their right in ensuring a democracy, we've got a problem. And I think what has happened in Dominica over the years, we have not been active enough in ensuring that democracy exists. I think the Dominican population have been.
Let me stick up in there. I'm glad you're getting into that, because I wanted to come in and great so far your presentation, but I see you segueing into what have happened. And the question I had that there, I made a note while you were speaking. And the 3 areas that we could tie together pretty much is that, for one, what are those who say, well, you vote for government, you should allow them to rule. When you said, there should be observance of law and order, allow them to rule and govern. That's what you voted for. When then the next 5 years, if you don't like what they did, you take them out. And then, of course, the whole question of participation. How do we get our citizens engaged? What is missing? Where is that missing link?
You see, and that is why I laid out the 7 principles. Because if that's the argument, then only one principle here matters, that a regular and free election is what democracy is about. And it's not. And that is the issue. Democracy is not about only about regular and free election. It's a work in progress. Because here's the deal, Mr. Thomas. If that's the case, then we should remove every law and every rules in the book and the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't work every 5 years. It's a situation where every day there might be violations. Every day we can stray away from what takes us to that point. And if we don't nip it in the bud at the time, what happens is when the elections are manipulated, when the balance of power has shifted into one individual, it becomes more and more difficult, because the deeper you get away. I like to use analogies. If you and I are going from point A to point B, and we decide it's about 200 miles away, and we're on a ship and we set our course, every angle you move away from that course is the further and further away you're going to be from your target once you get there, if you get what I'm saying. So therefore, at the beginning of this democratic experience, we have to remain the course. And the only way you remain the course to get from point A to point B and not stray away from where democracy is to have the checks and balance, have the active participation of citizens through citizen groups, through civic organizations, through your courts, through your schools, through your churches, through every aspect of society has to be constantly involved. The people has to be involved. The power of the people doesn't rest because the government has to work. So when the government falls, then the people have a right to stand up and say, enough is enough. We are going in the wrong direction. We need to bring it back. One of the things I realize for our democracy, we have a parliamentary system. And the way our population is involved is we have representatives. Every constituency has a representative, famously known as the PAL rep. And the PAL rep is supposed to be elected by the people in that constituency. The last election, you know what happened? The ruling party decided that they were giving one individual the right to choose who goes up for that constituency. That is a disrespect of democracy. That is basically trashing democracy aside. And it was not stopped. So if eventually you ended up with a system that from the inception had not been democratic, then that system cannot be democratic. In other words, if the Prime Minister of Dominica was given the right to select who represents the who represent the constituencies, then that was not a democratic process because the people did not decide that. And democracy is about the whole population having that ability. So right away, if a party allows an individual or release the power of the people in that decision making, then at the end of the day, what we get, it cannot be democratic. It cannot be a democratic organization if the genesis of that institution is currently wrong. And what do we have? If the court's not working, the people have to stand up. And the most important point about the democracy is to ensure that the will of the majority of the people is always respected.
All right. Paula, we want to acknowledge some of the folks on our live feed with any comments or just acknowledge them. But before we do that, though, I think the note on which Len just ended is a good note. I have before me, and I think I sent a copy to Lofty because he requested a copy and to Civic Vibe. It was a testimony prepared by Secretary General Louis Almagro. He's the Secretary General of the Organization of American States. And he presented that just last year, March of last year, 2021, the challenges to democracy in the Western Hemisphere, 20 years after the Inter-American Charter. And he was making that presentation before a Senate on foreign relations in the US. And here's what he said on the whole question of power, what Len just ended on there. There is a certain kind of leadership that does not want to relinquish power. For some, when they have been touched by power, they are seized with a desperate, selfish need to hold on. Power is their path to wealth and business. It provides them immunity and guarantees impunity, and elections have become zero-sum. If the winner takes all and political loss is met with retribution, it inevitably becomes easy to justify using any and all means necessary to stay in power, unquote. I just thought I would reference that. And that was said by the Secretary General of the OAS just last year, March of last year. And he's saying that's the kind of leadership that he's seen emerging in the region, within the Americas and the Caribbean. Folks who want to hold on to power, and they're holding it on so as to enable their wealth and their business, and they will do anything to hold on to that power. Herein lies what we as citizens have to do. Paula, I know Len is going to comment on that. You want to recognize some folks on with us, and any comment you might want to take, and then we can take a brief break and come back.
Yes, Mr. Thomas. Let me just read out a few messages here from some of the persons on the live feed, because we have to do just as Lofty does. We do not want anybody to report us here to Lofty this afternoon, okay? All right. And someone who goes by the name of David Josie, he said that Dominicans fail to understand the true concept of politics and the consequences of election, as well as their votes, until and unless we as the people understand that country must always come first And so policies and plans and ideas should always take precedence over love for party and politicians. And we will continue to be last in everything in the region. And he said, period. But listening to Mr. Matthew here this afternoon, and even what he pointed out when he spoke about the 7 principles, and the 7 principles here that he spoke about, I took some notes here. And political tolerance. And when I spoke earlier, before Mr. Matthew came in, and I spoke about the police officers who are blocking up the streets and all of that, political tolerance for the people who walk every Wednesday, and the police feel that they have a right to come and block the route. And they feel like at one point, I cannot tolerate the walkers anymore. So it's like, if you touch my barricade, then I will tear gas you or I will arrest you. No. Earlier also, I spoke about the persons who sometimes they accept money for their votes. And when people accept money for their votes, they feel like they cannot speak freely. And this, again, is the control and the abuse of power by the persons in government. And we are saying these things, we should never allow this to happen. There was one point that's very interesting that Mr. Matthew made. And he said that if the courts will not work, then the people need to stand. And we saw this the other day when this matter was taken before the court, and then the CCJ say, okay, look exactly what we, the people of Dominica, should do. And then some persons started attacking the CCJ because they felt that the CCJ should not have said that. But I always believe, like Mr. Matthew have said, that if things do not work for you on one end there, you have to stand on the other end. And that's why when I go out there and I walk, I have no fear, because I know for a fact that according to our constitution in this country, no police officers should arrest any citizen for walking freely in a democratic country or standing out and speak. And what Mr. Matthew have said here this afternoon, he have said so much. And I know the persons that are listening here will agree with him. And like there's a saying that wise men come from the east, but I want to say this afternoon that this is not true. Very wise men come from the north and the north.
Paula, I'm going to have to shut you. I'm going to mute your mic. I'm going to mute your mic, Paula.
Because
I'm from the east, you know, my parents are from the east, Laplin. All right, folks, we're going to take a very short break again, just to kind of, break the trend, the monotony, if I may use that word, and just take a little of Dice lyrics, and we'll come right back. It won't be long, right back. So, Master Control, take it from there.
My heart is heavy, my soul not free. I feel this every day. Maybe I'm just guilty. Dominica has become this way, where our people are standing on political mischief and division. And politicians control citizens, hearts and soul, before God, before land, before church, before family and country. Here, Dominica, my true confession is what I didn't do. I watched you suffer, for my allegiance was to someone else, not you.
Attention, everybody, beginning with me. That's what the dice is saying to us this afternoon. Go ahead, Paula.
Let me read this here by Mr. John Blanchard. John Blanchard said it right. We recently saw it in Grand Bay. The candidate was chosen by the PM, despite the fact that other persons from the community show interest in contesting for the Dominica Labour Party. You all remember that the 13 candidates were changed in 2019 general election, and they were the people's choice. And sorry, were they the people's choice or one-man selection? So what Mr. Blanchard is saying, in 2019 general election, there were 13 candidates that were changed, and it was the choice of one man. Yes.
All right.
So Paula, that is what I mentioned earlier, because we have what they call a representative government, and to have the true input of the population, we are divided into constituencies, and within those constituencies, they select an individual for a political process to go up on their behalf, to represent their interests, to represent what develops the community in parliament, because parliament ultimately is where the country's politicians, whether it's opposition or government, meet to decide the best path for the country. So therefore, if you are building something and your foundation is not democratic, then ultimately the end results cannot be democratic. We are already in an autocracy in Dominica. So the fact that the people did not exercise their right to select who they want, and the prime minister was allowed to fire our representatives, then the Labour Party is not a democratic institution. It's a dictatorship. And it's encouraged by individuals who are neglecting one of the several fundamental principles of democracy. And one is accountability. The other one is equality and the control of abuse of power. We've seen it. And you mentioned earlier about police officers using the barricade. And that is where the citizens' participation comes in. Some of these police officers do not realize that the police cap they have on their head, the police uniform, any instrument used by the police belongs to the state. And when it belongs to the state in a democratic society, it belongs to us, the people. So the irony of the situation is there are people who are exercising their democratic right, and the police are using barricade to prevent that from happening. And I think the population of Dominica does not appreciate the fact of why we have a democracy. And that's why I mentioned earlier, people have to really ask themselves, do you want a monarchy? Do you want an autocracy? Do you want a dictatorship or authoritarian government? And if you do not want that, and you want your voice to be heard, you want your ideas to be heard, then the only system of government that supports that kind of activity, making sure that we are all equal, is in a democracy. And I think when people understand their rights, understand their role in the whole system of our governance, the agreement that we have to coexist, then they will appreciate the strength they have in being active, in speaking out, in standing up. When things are going wrong, it's all right to demonstrate. We don't necessarily have to demonstrate to overthrow a government. And I'm not saying that because of the Labour Party. This is for every government that is in office, whether it's a Labour Party, whether it's UWP, whether it's Freedom. We have to have checks and balances. And if stuff is not going right, the people can stand up and say, you know what? We are not going to work tomorrow. For example, I looked at a situation. If you had to carry out a survey and ask every Dominican, do you agree with an individual who's in the prime ministership spending $64,000 a month on his rent? Do you think majority of Dominicans will agree with that? That is what democracy is about. I guarantee you the population will say no, but guess what happened? Because he already established an autocracy within the Labour Party and his cabinet members, he could override the decision to have a decent revenue budget on the state of Dominica, and impose whatever charges he wants, and nobody asks questions. Where is the transparency? Where's the accountability? Where's the control for abusing power? And we look at a situation recently where the government is putting a system in place and saying, well, you know, you 40-year-olds have not been able to build a house for yourselves, so we're going to do it by using your own resources, putting something in place and letting you go get a loan. But here's the deal. Where is the economic freedom? Where is the economic freedom? One of the several principles of a democracy. So for over the last 20 years, the institution that has been supervising or destroying, I should say, our constitution has made our Dominican citizens dependent. There is no economic freedom by the fact that they are admitting that our young people have not developed over the last 20 years. And therefore, I am going to do this for you. And these are the problems. But these things are only going to stop when the people of Dominica realize in a democracy, it's not the responsibility of the government to ensure that the constitution is being kept. Is the responsibility of the entire population, the majority. And we have to put our selfishness aside. We have to put our greed aside and realize if we don't safeguard that democracy, then we are all going to be destroyed the same way.
Okay, good observation. Let me just make a quick passing reference to, I'm not sure many of you may be aware of that, but last year, the government of Dominica, after having repeatedly asked several times to submit a report to the United Nations on what is to be the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And the whole question of democracy comes in there, and a number of the areas that Len has mentioned, Paul has mentioned. And finally, after 27 years, you heard the number right, 27 years. Last year in March of 2020, the government finally responded to the request of the United Nations through the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and commented on, there were a list of 24 issues that were raised as it relates to democracy and persons' rights, their civil and political rights. And among these has to do with the right to protest, the right to a free press, the right to a number of things that Len have raised there. And one of the areas that mentioned as it relates to police force and all of that had to do with the situation, I believe it was back in February of 2017, where they charged certain opposition leaders for inciting and all that stuff, when the police opened fire on live ammunition on the residents of Salisbury on 2 occasions, in 2015 and again on the eve of the 2019 election, general elections. Hear how Ambassador Vince Henderson responded when the question was put to him in terms of the use of force by the police, which in their view was contrary to the Constitution. And he referred by saying section 2, subsection 2 of the Constitution is similar to provisions in law within member states. Stand your ground laws are well known throughout the United States. That's his response. Stand your ground laws are well known throughout the United States. The recognition of the use of force in self-defense is a matter to be determined by the courts. So he's saying that when the police officer chooses to behave in the manner that they're behaving, it's similar to stand your ground, like what obtains in the US. And therefore they are right to do that. And if you as a citizen have a difficulty with that, then you should take that matter up in the courts. There are several other areas in the report that was presented. As I said, after a period of 27 years, it was noted that during a 20-year period, there were 20 states of emergency issued in Dominica, so 1 for every year. And his response was most of that had to do with when we had hurricanes or natural disaster. So my question again, Len, and I know you kind of alluded to it in a sense, but for the purposes of what we're doing now and which we'll continue to do, bear in mind, folks might say, well, hey, you guys come every Sunday and just talk, pally, but it's going to continue. Because as you say, democracy is an ongoing process and we need to remain vigilant. How do we get our people, and in particular, our young persons, engaged? How do you see young people can become engaged? What do you see as possible, I would say maybe solutions or area where you think young people can become engaged again. Because Matthew, though, I don't think all is lost. I think young persons are maybe just watching and waiting, and young people can still be engaged. And I'm sure they're aware of what's happening. Don't underestimate, they're not stupid. It's like a kid at your home. You might feel, well, the child is not observing what you're doing, but the child is watching your every move. And one day the child might just say to you, well, hey, daddy, you tell me don't do that, and I see you do that. Or mommy, you said don't do that, and you do that. So what's your take on that?
I'm making this based on my observation. We've had experiences in Dominica in our recent history in '78 where people stood up because one leader, Patrick John, history's been redefining and clarifying the events that led up to that. One leader, Patrick John, was going in the direction that was not acceptable to the society, and people came up. What I think is happening is, at that time, most people, you get out of high school, you get out of school, and your intention is to grow in your country, develop in your country, buy a piece of property, build your home, raise your family, get old, retire. And that was the idea. I think what has shifted from that to today is we have the influence of the internet, the influence of television. And in the natural laws of everything, people will respond to pain and suffering. People will respond if they feel that their existence is being threatened. If individuals think that they have options, then they would choose the path of least resistance. So back in '78, where most people felt that they were going to live in Dominica, there was an incentive, there was a desire to fight because that was your future. I think today, what is the circumstances is that a lot of young people choose the path of least resistance. There is an option to travel. You can go to Guadeloupe, to St. Martin, to Antigua, to the US Virgin Islands, to the US. You can go to England. So with a small population of 70,000 people, you have 5,000 or 6,000 young people that have an opportunity to move. And we see even and I have first-hand experience of even with the scholarship program, that the government has impacted. A lot of the young people who frankly come to the US under government scholarship told me that they have no intentions of going back home because there's nothing there for them. And I think that is part of the problem, where the folks have an option. They have an option to leave. They have a path of least resistance. And once you have a path of least resistance, you don't need to fight. You don't want to fight. And the easiest choice is to leave. And I think that is part of our issue, that most people will choose to go somewhere else where they can make it and not have to fight, because they don't have to stay in that system. I don't have to retire. It's a good and a bad thing, depends on how you look at it. And I think that is part of the problem with a lot of young people just realizing, hey, you know what? Back in the days, most people didn't have people sending money overseas for them. Most people didn't have folks in the first world countries in England, and who could send them $20, send them $200. It's bad, but they have that out. And I think, Thomas, honestly, I think that is one of the issues. It may be significant, I don't know, unless somebody carries out a survey or study, but I think that is one of the issues, because naturally, if I am pushed against a wall, no matter where I am, and the only option I have is to fight, I will fight. So therefore, if there are young people in Dominica who cannot go anywhere, who cannot escape the situation, and realize, you know what, I have to deal with that situation and confront it, they will. Equally so, there are individuals in Dominica who know better. The people who work in the ministry, the people who are the permanent secretaries, there are lots of people in Dominica who know what is happening is wrong. But guess what? They're in the same desperate situation. They have a loan, they have their kids to pay, they have their bills, and there's no options. We don't have private sector growth in Dominica. The government is the biggest employer. What was one of the fundamental principles of democracy I mentioned? Economic freedom. there is too much economic dependence in Dominica when the government is the largest employer. So the government used that distribution of resources, our resources, to hold the country hostage. So if you speak out against the government, guess what? I'm going to victimize you. Guess what? You cannot get a job in the private sector that replaces that income. And therefore, you have to be subservient to the individuals in charge. So here lies the problem. So it's not just about the young people fighting, but the older ones who know better and who have that experience of 78, who knows that certain things are going wrong, who, by the way, have taken an oath to execute their duties and their responsibility. But because there is no economic freedom, one of the 7 principles of democracy, they are held hostage with their own resources. And as a result, there is no incentives to do anything, because if I lose that salary I have, how am I going to pay my loan? How am I going to pay my bill? I'm going to be victimized, and Dominica doesn't provide that. So it's complex, but all these things fall hand in hand, Mr. Thomas.
All right. Paula, you have any comment you want to make? I see Marshall raised a question there, but if you have any comment, you want to go ahead, and I'll come to that in a minute.
Yes, what Mr. Matthew said is right about the young person there, and a number of young persons there, because they feel that, okay, I can go to Guadeloupe, I can go to St. Martin, I can go to the US. So they figure out, okay, if things are not working here, there's no need for me to go to the streets and speak out or, try to defend. It's like a lot of persons, I noticed what they've been doing recently, because even when you walk the streets and some young persons would say, what is really happening? Where are you all walking to? What is really taking place? These people, they do not read, they do not listen to radio, they do absolutely nothing that is happening. And then when they cannot face the struggle anymore, they buy a ticket and they leave Dominica. Now, what I've noticed for a very long time now, you pass at some of the places where people receive money from overseas, and these lines are filled. You go there every day and these lines are filled. People from overseas are sending money for their family back home. I'm not saying it never used to happen before, but I noticed it's been more than the days gone by, because think about it, that you sent your child to school and this child obtained a very good education, went to from kindergarten, primary, secondary, university, college, and then you have this child working, maybe cleaning the gutter, cleaning by the side of the road for $500 or $600 a month. What can that really do for you? $500 and $600, you cannot get a house if you from the rural area, get a house around town to rent for $500 or $600. By the time you pay your bills and you have nothing left. So that's the reason why a lot of the young persons, they figure out there's other means and way out. So it's like, I don't need for me to go there and fight or anything. But guess what? There will come a time when these very same young people who will leave Dominica and they will go overseas and spend 20, 25 years. And then they will retire and they want to come back home. Now, if they do not protect the Dominica that we have today, 20, 25 years from now, when they retire and they want to come back home, there is not going to be the same Dominica. I know there's persons who say, I work overseas for 30, 40 years and I have retired and I want to come back home and enjoy, beautiful Dominica. But what is really happening here? It's not appealing for persons who have worked overseas and retire that really want to come back home. Some of them maybe will just come and spend like a little holiday, maybe summer holiday, spend a week or two, and then they will go back overseas, and that's not where these people want to be. And this is the reason why we have to maintain our democracy, because these people who have worked overseas for a number of years, some persons will say, oh, you went overseas and you had your good time, and now you want to come back and talk and tell us how to run our country. It's all of us country. And this is the reason why we that are here, we have to stand up, because those of you who may go to another country, like you rightly said, there's a lot of young persons who go up there, they study, and then they say, I'm not going to come back home because there is nothing for me. There's a lot of bright brains that are out there, and they are building another country, whereas they could be building Dominica. Yeah. But what I've noticed, with this that is passing or posing as the government, anybody that is smarter than them they do not want them to return home because they figure out they're going to take their space. And this is the reason why I sometimes ask the police officers, those who work with us, those who put their barricades up, I say to them, do you have kids? Do you have children? Do you have brothers? Do you have sisters? You send your child to school for X amount of years. Wouldn't you want your child to be a leader in their own country? And they do not respond to that because you know what? This ignorance that they have mounted in their brain, that all they see is one color or particular political party, and they tell you, I support this party, they do not know what, be it is red, blue, green, whatever color, and all they see is that's what that they have in their brain is a political party where someone say, I will rule for up to 70 years and then I will let my son or my daughter take over. I'm saying, how can we develop a country like that? We won't go anywhere because this is pure ignorance.
Yeah. Thanks, Paula. Thanks, Paula. Yeah.
Yeah, and Thomas, I just wanted to add a little bit to that because I knew you asked, how can we get the young people to realize that they need to fight for that democracy? And Paula, just when Paula was talking, it just clicked in my head again. Because in a dictatorship, the ideas in an autocracy and a monarchy, the ideas, the intellectual come from a limited few. What a democracy allows is for more ideas to come from a greater percentage of the population. What advances a country is the creativity, the diversity. As a matter of fact, diversity is the key to survival. In any situation, in biology, in the natural world, in the physical world, diversity is the key to survival. And if you have diverse ideas, so all these young people who go back, they should realize in a democratic process, their input is as equal as the Prime Minister of Dominica. And I will say this, Yellow who walks on the street has just as much right as Roosevelt carried and the President of Dominica. So people have to understand that as a citizen of the country, young or old, your rights, your responsibility, your equal participation in the process, your ideas are valuable to the development of the country. But what the autocrats and the dictatorship does, it takes away that right from these young people to valuable to contribute to the society. And as a result, the society and the community on a whole loses. Just think of it that way, on the basic foundation of it. You and your family, Mr. Thomas, you have 5 children, and you spend so much time putting rules and laws, not realizing that your son had the knack and the talent to be one of the best surgeons. And because you didn't raise him right, he left or he didn't realize his full potential. And one day something happens to you and you get really sick and you need a surgeon. Guess what just happened to you? You have denied yourself an opportunity to get the best training, and as a result, you perish. That is no different in a society. So when we have an individual who thinks that all ideas come from him, who thinks that the solution for a country of 70,000 people come from him and a select few through their selfish intervention, what happens is the young people need to realize in the democratic society, they have equal rights. Their participation is as important as every parliamentary representative and minister of government. They have to be accountable and they need economic freedom. And they play an essential role in the development of the community, the society, and the advancement of the country. So the issue is, how do we get them there? I think it has to start in the schools. I think the school curriculum needs to bring back civic. And I saw in the newspaper recently that they are talking about bringing civics back into school like it's something all new and all some new discovery. When I was in PSS back in 1989, when I started school in PSS, we had civics being taught in schools. So there's nothing new to discover, except my problem is the ones who are implementing this policy, they have already been compromised. But I think it has to start in the schools, from as early as your elementary schools to your secondary school. It has to be part of the society. And people have to be given the space to express themselves within the context of the law.
Yeah, I agree with you, Len, and also with some of the comments that Paula made. But let me just say, though, that I want to give young people a little more credit. And I believe, though, that, again, I made the comment in my opening remarks stating that our responsibility as citizens is to as citizens to vote is important, but we shouldn't go into the voting booth uninformed. And I say so against the backdrop of what, you know, some of the issues that have been raised as it affects Dominica. And some of us have made reference to the fact of the CWO that takes place on weekends for young people, Saturday, Sunday, or Friday. And my own response to that is that maybe if there wasn't that CWO, a lot worse would have happened. And that's just a way for those young people to vent their inner emotions and frustrations and stress. Then what happens between Monday and Friday? So in other words, this young guy on the block, this 30-year-old guy, this 20-something-year-old guy, this 40-something-year-old guy who has no job, who's on the block in St. Joseph, in Granby, in Colby Street, in Mao, in Pizza Van, wherever. What happens during Monday to Friday? Because there's no CWO during that time. It's on the weekend. That's where we have to engage them. That's where we have to begin. And that is why, as Team Civic Vibes, part of what we do today and expressing and sharing that information so that you go into the polling booth, not just to vote, but informed. Marshall asked the question earlier, Marshall Lawrence, participation of citizens. Question, why do so many persons at home in particular eligible to vote do not vote or do not do so? And that's a great question. And I happen to do to look at some statistics and numbers over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 general elections. And what I've noticed is that the percentage of voters turnout have dropped significantly, say from 1990 through to the last election, 2019. In 1990, we had a 66.64% voter turnout. In 1995, we had 65.18, it dropped. In 2000, we had 60.14, it dropped again. In 2005, we had 59.08, it dropped. In 2009, we had 55.11, it dropped. In 2014, it went up slightly to 57.45. And in last election, it was only 54.4%. So what that tells you is that notwithstanding how great some people might say things are, just a little over half of people who should and can vote are voting. That clearly tells you that people are dissatisfied, people are not happy, people want something different. The question is, how do we get that to move? But here's another interesting statistics, which I need to share. In 2014, election just before the 2019, the number of registered voters was 72,277. Registered voters. The population was 73,286. Can you imagine that? The registered voters, people register, which you have to be 18 years and older to register, was 72,277. The population was 73,286, a difference of 1,000 people. In 2019, the registered voters was 74,895. The population was just a little over 72,000. Now, this is an area that the CCJ and also Justice Glasgow mentioned that there appeared to be a patent non-compliance with Section 17 of the Electors Registration Act, whereby the list that was used was not the correct list. So herein lies, we have to take those issues and talk about those issues, be informed. And it is my view that notwithstanding what you've said about these young persons, those who have the ability to go and those remaining maybe not as being engaged, hence the reason we have to continue that conversation that we're having. That same report that I referenced earlier from the Secretary General of the OAS, hear what he had to say as part of his remarks as well. When people take issue with our reports, and he's referring to the reports like the OAS, Joint CARICOM, OAS Commonwealth report on the elections in Dominica, as well as the CCJ comments as well. When people take issue with our report, it is because they don't like the facts. Facts is a stubborn thing. They don't like the facts. That's what he's saying. Strong and continued support for robust international election observation will be vital in ensuring these processes earn the trust and confidence of those casting their ballot. So that's in a way in response to what Marshall just asked. We need We also need to invest resources and political support to follow up on the recommendation for strengthening the reforms proposed by this election observers mission, and we must be prepared for what lies ahead. So I'm saying this, all of this to say, and in response to the question Marshall posed, is that the people have become disenchanted, the loss of trust, the loss of confidence, the whole lack of transparency. That is what has manifested itself over the years. And people don't even see the need to go in and cast their vote. So our job and our work, which is cut off for those of us who are here, and those on the chat, there are several people on the chat who are listening and who are tuning in, to spread the information, to spread the word. Because like you say, at some point in time, it's like how you say, you use a lot of analogies. I'm using this one. It's like a cornered rat. When he has nowhere else to jump, he's going to jump. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you have. And that is where we are. And we have seen throughout history and in recent history too, where young people have taken the baton and changed its trajectory of things. We don't have to go far. The Arab Springs is just a couple years ago. So I have faith, and I believe that that at some point we'll get to that stage.
So, Mr. Thomas, Celestine, I'm just jumping ahead. I don't know if you have anything.
Go ahead.
But let me add to that. Historically, there is voter turnout has always been an issue, and in certain elections, especially in the U.S., the general elections also always have a higher turnout from the voting population because there's a lot more at stake. And if you go and look at, the governor's race and city and municipal elections, there are lots of decisions that are made there with probably 30–40% of the votes in those elections. Dominica is no different. And naturally, people will react when there is a Hurricane Maria or something of great significance that can greatly affect their life. But what we saw, and I'm going to use the US as an example, what we saw in the last election between Hillary Clinton and the former president, Donald Trump, the talk in the US was we have two very bad, terrible candidates. And as a result, a lot of the Democrats did not show up for Hillary Clinton and decided they were not going to the polls to vote. And like I've always said, election has consequences. Election has consequences. So a lot of people didn't show up to vote, and they decided, well, you know what, we're not giving Hillary Clinton our vote because it's the worst of two evils, and decided not to vote. Guess what happened? Donald Trump won the election as a Republican, and as a result, he got the opportunity to select two Supreme Court judges who were conservatives. For 50+ years, the conservatives in America have been fighting every year to overturn Roe versus Wade. And people thought that if, it had been decided upon in the Supreme Court 50 years ago, then it would last forever. But we recently saw, as a result of the appointments of Donald Trump, the Supreme Court decided to turn that decision back to the states. And guess what is happening now? Roe versus Wade is in trouble. And a lot of Americans are now paying for that decision they have made over 4 years ago. So election does have consequences. Whether you are conservative, you are against abortion, you're for abortion, besides the point. The point is, as a democratic society, the majority has the right to make decisions. And I think it has always been a challenge because democracy is not perfect. And as we say, it's always a work in progress. And I think one of the issues with the naysayers of democracy, the ones who are autocrats, and we've heard it in Dominica, our prime minister says, I use cash, or he says, I work faster than the government, because one of the disadvantages of democracy, you have to go through the process of the parliament and the argumentation. And Aristotle and Plato knew back then, you have to use logic and reasoning to think about the best situation and ideas to develop. That sometimes takes time. And as a result, people who have alternative goals, like our current prime minister, will say, hey, you know what? I work faster than the government. I'm going to use cash because checks and going through the system take too long. So what we have seen is that the loopholes in democracy have been used against the democratic process for the rising autocracy around the world. And that has been an issue. But overall, what we have seen through the years is people don't understand that when you are not happy with what is happening, the best decision is not sitting it out. The best decision is making a vote against what is there, to change what is there. And I think that's a hard concept and appeal to swallow, even if I talk while talking to some of my elder family members. And they express to me that I don't like what is happening, I'm not voting. And I keep saying you have to vote, because if you don't like it and you're not voting, it's like voting for what is there. You have to exercise that right to take out what is there, bring in something new. And if what's new is not working, go back to the polls when you get that chance and remove it. And for some reason, that concept is hard because they're different, they're disenfranchised, and they decide I'm not going to the polls. But what we have to understand, like I gave with the example with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, election has consequences. And when you don't go out to vote, then you are not exercising the democratic right. Remember what I said, the principles of democracy is citizens' participation is the number one principle of a democracy. And I think as you rightly say, Alvin, we have to continue having this conversation, but in addition to having this conversation, put a series of action items in place for the civic organization to go out there and spread that word. If it means we have to take a bullhorn and every Thursday or every month go to a different community and have this kind of conversation, that's what we need to do, because that's what dissemination of information is. Sometimes the kids go to party on a weekend because they don't hear that information. They don't listen to radio. Nowadays, everybody's on their phone. We have to find a way to reach them. We have to find a way to reach them. We have to find a way so that information can get to them, because the same way the propaganda, the lies get to them, the TikToks, we have to use this media information to get that system out. So part of the issue is us. When we talk about the situation, as much as I don't like social media, but if it's for a purpose, we have to get into the TikToks. We have to get into what the people like and start doing those things to disseminate information so it reaches the population where they are. It reaches the young folks. We have to make those things cool. And I think what happened is for the older folks and for probably people in my age group, we fail to realize that the young people mode of receiving information is no longer
younger people like you or older people. Which one? I'm gonna make sure I hear carefully.
we have to get away from the traditional sources of information like DBS Radio and Kyrie FM and meet them at their level. Meet them on the TikToks, meet them on the Facebook, meet them on the Twitter, meet them on those mediums so they can get that information. And I think that's where we have to go with the civic organization. And I know some folks are doing that, but these are some of the things we have to do. Look at what happened in America. Take America, for example. Look at what happened with Facebook and Twitter. They're using it to spread propaganda. They had to take the old president off because that's the mode of reaching the population. And when the last election happened with Joe Biden, and the Democrats realized that their lack of turning out caused the American system and the American culture to change. They had the largest turnout of voters in the last election because a lot was at stake. So here lies the answer to your question. We have to reach the young people at their level and try everything possible so that they can get the information on democracy.
All right. Great comments, Len. Man, it's amazing how time flies. We are almost 9 minutes away from the end of the program. And Paula, I'm seeing a lot of comments on our feed, both Facebook. I'm sure you've seen them too. With reference to the information I shared a while ago on the registered voters and the population, I'm seeing some comments here. But let me say to those of you who are listening, these are facts. This is not numbers I just pull out from my head. If you look at the OAS reports that were presented in the 2019 and the 2014 election, and these were election observers. I think I mentioned something like a mission made up of 25 or so persons. The last observer mission that was done in Dominica. They reported on that in their report. the fact that the registered voters was almost that of the population. So certainly we have a big issue there. That's an issue. And also the fact that there was a patent non-compliance with the Section 17 of the registration of electors list regulations. So that is right there. This is right there. These are facts. These are facts. These are not opinions. These are facts. And that is why when, I mean, there's so much areas that we can cover. And as we say, we're just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, Len made reference to the separation of power as one of his areas. And as we know, you have the judiciary, we have the legislature, and we have the executive, which in that case would be the cabinet. But what we have is a strange situation in Dominica, where the legislature and the executive is one and the same. Because we've seen how the discussion in parliament are conducted, and the fact that the opposition is not given the respect and time to contribute to issues in parliament. So what you have a majority in parliament, which happens to form the government of 18 or 15, whatever that number is. And then these are the same person that makes up the executive, the cabinet. So you don't have no distinction there. When this guy go in the legislature and they make it appear, well, hey, it's the executive doesn't get involved in that. It's not us, it's the legislature and the judiciary. No, the legislature and the executive, as we have it now, can be one and the same. And you have a situation where the Attorney General, which is supposed to be the Dominican's Attorney General to advise the government, sides with the legislature in parliament. So we got a lot of work ahead of us as a country, as a nation. But before we end though, Paula, let's just take one more acknowledgement from our folks, because without our folks there, you know, and we're happy to have them. I think that in itself demonstrates the commitment to the work ahead. Those of us who are on those lives, Facebook, YouTube, and those of us who come here every Sunday to do this. So Paula, let's quickly just observe. We have maybe about what, 6 more minutes to wind down. So let's quickly observe just a few. Then I will have Len make his closing comments, and then we'll bring the program to an end. So go ahead, Paula.
Okay, yes. Someone who goes by the name of David Josie. He said, if we do not participate in the process, then how can we expect change? And he's talking about election. If we want change, then we must participate in the process, no matter how disgruntled we are or how unfair we find the system. This is the way we can make a difference. Now, time and time again, we have always said that persons who live overseas, we are not saying that they do not have the right to vote. Although I may have a different take on some of the criteria, but time and time again, we have always said that persons who live overseas, if your name is on the list and you've been to Dominica, you know, for a period of time before elections, because the persons who actually contest elections, they have given a lot of take on that. And your name is on the list, and we believe that you've been here for a period of time, then it's okay. Although some persons would say, okay, well, you live overseas, that's where you live, you should not come to Dominica and vote and go back. But what we've seen, there are persons who have lived overseas for like 10, 15, 20, some of them even 30 years, and came to Dominica to vote in the 2019 general election. Some of them came in the morning and they left the afternoon. Some came in the morning and they left the next day. And we are saying even some persons who their names are not on the list in certain constituencies, they were allowed to vote. And like you said, in the 2014 and 2019 election, and where we saw that the registration was much higher than even the population. Right. Because you have a population of 73,000 and you have like 72 persons registered to vote. Right. Right. You are saying that everybody in the country voted. The elderly persons who are bedridden, those who are at the hospital and were not able to make it to go to the polling station, the babies that were not yet born, the underage or under 18, even these persons were voting. And we are saying, Mr. Thomas, the only way that this thing can have a turnaround is to have a re-registration, cleaning up the voters list, and the persons who are living overseas. If you want to participate and partake in our elections, come here, spend your time. When elections are called, you meet the criteria and you vote.
All right, Paula, thanks for that. I take it. I'm going to take that as maybe your close comment. Lena, you have 1 minute closing comment, 1 minute, and then I will just come and wrap it up and just take it from there. Go ahead, Len.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for having me on the program today to share my thoughts and my ideas. But I'd like to remind the people, democracy is of the people, for the people, by the people. And the several principles are citizens' participation, equality, political tolerance, accountability, transparency, regular, free and fair election, economic freedom, and control of the abuse of power, self-regulation. And I think as much as we can excite the people to understand that the power is always in their hands as a united society, where we say in our national anthem, all for each and each for all, we should practice these words and mean it and come out there and make the difference and right the wrongs of our country for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Len. Thank you so much. Thank you. Let me just end the discussion, the conversation, I would say. And again, I just want to reference the OAS Secretary General. The OAS have a very involved position in our elections in terms of observing what's going on. And again, I'm quoting from the testimony that was presented by the Secretary General, which applies to us in Dominica. As citizens of the Americas and member states of the OAS, we each have the responsibility to act as leaders when it comes to fighting for just cause. And there is no cause more just than that of human rights, democracy, the rule of law, and development. I think all of those areas, they were captured in what Len had to say. Len, I want to thank you very much for your contribution this afternoon. I want to thank all our Facebook viewers on with us, YouTube. Want to thank Lofty, those at on the console, behind the scene, ensuring that everything goes well, on point. Want to thank you all. Folks, it's a challenge, it's a process. Let's not give in, let's not throw in the towel. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think we're all committed to that. It's not easy, but I think we can. Paula, you wanted to say a final thank you?
Yes, let me say thank you very much, Lennon Matthew. This is a very brilliant young man. Time and time again, he has made his contribution on one of the well-known radio stations here. So thank you so very much, Mr. Matthew. Mr. Alvin Thomas, I think we did justice this afternoon to the program in the absence of Lofty. And we want to just give the viewers that what we first said this afternoon, just a little info that later down in the month, we're going to be celebrating World Democracy Day. So we'll give you some more information during the course of the week and next Sunday here on the program and what it will be all about. So thank you very much to all our viewers, those who stayed with us. As usual, I want to say have a blessed week. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Paula. And yes, as Paula said, on the 15th of this month, we'll be observing International Democracy Day. We call on all of you in Dominica, wherever you are. The venue is going to be at what's it called, Paula, down in Newtown?
Harlem Plaza.
Harlem Plaza at Bobby's Place. We have a packed program, and everybody should come out here and speak their voice to democracy and what's going on in our country. This is a UN initiative, which began, as I said, 15 years ago. And we have the obligation and the responsibility to protect and safeguard our democracy in Dominica. So thank you all, thank you all, thank you all. And at this stage, we will end. I don't have any announcement, Paula. So Master Control, it's back to you. Thank you, good night, and have a wonderful week, folks.
And good evening to Lofty, wherever you are. Good evening. I hope we did Lofty to the program.
Yes, Lofty. And Len, take care, Len. We'll be having you back because we just touched it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more I know that can be discussed, and the conversation needs to continue.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, guys.
All right, see you guys.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Master Control, take it back.